So we're the mobile guys here. We're going to have a good conversation about mobile. So let me introduce our panelists here. First, we have Michael Bayle, SVP and GM from ESPN on the mobile side of the business. Eric Litman is the chairman and CEO of Medialets. Otremba, CEO of Tilted. And Stephen Rosenblatt, CRO of Foursquare. So we're here talking about how you make money and how you make money in all different avenues, but specifically about mobile here. So why don't we kick it off where you guys can introduce yourselves and your company and talk about how you make make money in mobile. Mike?
I'm Michael Bayle. I look after our mobile business at ESPN, and the way we approach the market because of our brand is very much holistic. So we approach brands to transition some of their efforts in both brand awareness and direct response from television, print, digital, and mobile. So to that effect, it's all inclusive. It's challenging. The reality is mobile is different. So we're beginning to internalize those deltas between what the web experience may have been, television and mobile. And as per the previous speaker, in terms of companion viewing and second screen, that's the most exciting opportunity we think we can leverage in 2013.
I'm Eric Litman. I'm the CEO of Medialets, and our entire business is founded on the premise that Michael just shared, that mobile is in fact different. The technology is different. The use cases for what it means from a media perspective are different, and the way we need to think about it collectively as an advertising ecosystem is very different. So we provide technology for buyers of advertising to effectively execute in mobile, taking all the things that we've learned about the display advertising landscape as a roadmap, using a reset button to fix a whole lot of things that are broken there, and fundamentally make mobile a heck of a lot easier to do at scale.
I'm Otremba, and I'm the CEO of Tilted. And Tilted is the largest mobile game provider on the mobile web. And what we do, essentially, is, and when people ask me, what do you do for a living? I say, I help people waste time. But the fact of the matter is people like to spend money to waste time. So that's kind of the opportunity that we see. Well, what we essentially have is a platform on the mobile web, which is different than saying that we do apps. So all the gameplay, all the interaction is actually happening on the mobile web. And we provide a platform not only for our own games, of which we have a catalog of about 38 games, but now we're launching a platform for other people's games to be distributed in HTML5 through our distribution channel as an alternative or an addition to app stores, which is pretty interesting. And the way we make money, essentially, is two big buckets of revenue. We hope they're getting a lot bigger. One bucket is virtual commerce. So we have a virtual currency, and people have microtransactions when they're in their gameplay. And the other bucket is advertising. And our hope and our bet is that the whole concept of a mobile advertising ecosystem within mobile gameplay is only in its infancy. And we think we haven't seen anything yet. We're betting on the fact that all kinds of great stuff's coming.
I'm Stephen Rosenblatt with Foursquare. How many people besides Rashad and the zombies checked in today? All right, cool, very good. So Foursquare, I think, as a lot of you know, what we do is connect people with places. What started out 3.5 years ago, really pioneering the check-in mayors and badges. We've now evolved as we've really become the de facto local search recommendation engine out there, as you can see with all the data that we have. What I do is I spend a lot of time with large merchants, Best Buy, Walgreens, and small SMBs. And our goal is to help connect them with our 25 million strong audience and help them drive customers to their stores.
Great. So let's get a feel for the audience. For those who are in the ad sales business, how many of you, where you're selling in multiple platforms, is mobile 50% or more of your revenue streams? How about you?
Double digit.
Yeah. So, but also then when you take a look at your visitors, right? How many have a substantial amount of your visitors coming in through mobile devices? Okay, so a lot more there. So there's so much going on in mobile that we need to explore as all of the eyeballs are going that way, and obviously the dollars are going in that direction as well. And I think one of the key things we always need to balance is the user experience with how we're going to be monetizing that. We heard about 4 very different business models that you guys work on. So in mobile, where we're dealing with a much smaller device, how do you balance that experience for the user with the revenue streams, and who makes those decisions?
So we've recently begun to converge exactly that. We used to have two editorial rooms between the web and mobile, and even now between digital and television, that's converging. Secondly, in terms of user design, we had two different teams that often overlapped because of that small screen factor. And with the launch of something today, the iPad mini or previously Galaxy Note, that also gets confusing. Is it a tablet? Is it mobile? So back to what's different, if you look at the deltas, it's touch, it's location, it's portability. And so that's where we focus on extending the experience. So if you look at last night, you as a fan want to do a couple of different things. You want to watch Monday Night Football, and we allow for that because we broadcast that, or you want to follow the game for the Giants season, or the 7th game of the National League Series. And to do that, we don't own the rights, but we allow for our fans to follow us when we have content that we can provide, in this case, a simulcast or a radio stream. So our goal is, if you're portable, you're not in front of a desktop, to get that content as quickly as possible. How it's formed, the icons, the look and feel, we don't do the best job at the moment, but we're converging to get that same experience you've expected us either on television or on desktop.
Gotcha.
I would say, for us at Foursquare, we have to think about user experience, and we did launch, before we had a website, we were launching apps. So I think that gives us an advantage, and I think a lot of struggles for publishers is you have this legacy business where you've made a lot of money on the web, and you've had a lot more real estate. And how do you rip that apart and reimagine the whole experience on mobile? So we didn't have that challenge. We started off from a mobile-first perspective, and I think that gives us an advantage because it allowed us to think about user experience on small devices from the very beginning and create content that way. So from an ad perspective, the things that we rolled out this summer, not too dissimilar to a promoted tweet, is an update that's in stream, that's native to the experience. And I think that for us that works really well. I think if we were to put up things that were very intrusive, we would see a large swath of users starting to disappear on Foursquare. So, again, I think this is the challenge right now that a lot of media companies and publishers and technology companies are facing is in a smaller screen environment, what is the optimal experience, and what do what way to go? Do you go traditional display or some version of that, or do you create some type of native product? We've chosen to create a native experience here. That works really well with how our users engage.
Yeah, I'll just say in the casual gaming environment on mobile devices, and by the way, like Foursquare, we started out in mobile. Actually, the mobile screens have gotten bigger in our world because when we started, mobile screens were tiny, and our first games were on feature phones as a company. And so for us, though, when we think about advertising, I'll set the sort of virtual commerce and that whole revenue stream aside for a second. When we think about advertising, there are a lot of misconceptions that people have in the advertising world about how you effectively engage consumers with ads in casual games. And there's this belief that people won't pay attention to things, or it's so intrusive that people won't play, or what. That really isn't quite true. And what we find is that if even a basic thing like an ad banner, we've sort of figured out how to put it there so that people like it and respond well to it, but it doesn't get in the way of their experience of talking to other people while they're playing and so on. And I think that's one thing. The second thing is that we've learned is that the idea of advertising within casual gameplay doesn't actually get in the way of games, because only about half to 2/3 of what they're actually doing at any given time when they're with us is playing a game. Most of the time they're talking to each other, or a lot of times they're talking to each other, and they're doing things that are sort of social around the gameplay itself. And so those are all opportunities for ads too. Things like every time you level up, natural place to put an interstitial ad. When we think about how we roll games out, and how we think about our content, we think about how advertising can play in it. We don't sort of use advertising as an add-on that we sort of try to tack on at the end and hope it sticks somehow. It's an integral part of the experience because we want it to be.
So we've spent the last 4.5 years now doing nothing but mobile advertising, and the vast majority of that time has been spent with large media companies, understanding what their content might be, what the audience might be, and how receptive that audience might be to different ad models. We've seen everything tried, and the ones that we've seen be most successful are where the publisher finds the right balance between a certain level of interruptiveness, if I can coin that word, and a focus on particularly good creative. Those are the two key ingredients. You need to find an intersection point too. Ads that are incredibly well integrated into the content experience, while they're great for the user experience, we often find just don't perform terribly well, no matter where in the funnel those ads might exist. And so they end up taking a tremendous amount of inventory to accomplish what might otherwise be accomplished in a content experience or an ad experience that's a little bit more forward. Now, it all depends on the type of content. I'm a big Foursquare user, and I completely agree with Stephen. If they started throwing up large interrupted ads in the content stream, I might use Foursquare less. But if I'm in the middle of consuming sports scores, or I'm reading a bit of news, or I've just finished a level of my favorite casual game, I'm probably going to be more tolerant of something being a little bit more front and center. But it typically only works for me, and what we've seen sort of broadly from the data is it typically only works for most people if it's actually a good ad.
Let's dig into a couple of the areas that you guys brought up. I'm going to ask Lon first. You mentioned a little bit about virtual currency. Can you talk about how that plays into the advertising ecosystem for Tilted?
That's a great question, because I probably debate this topic every day. Because oftentimes we can offer a virtual currency as an incentive for people to interact with ads. And unfortunately, the marketplace to date has basically told us don't do it. And we've had to pull back on incented ads. And we think there's a place for them. We think our users want to do it. They like to earn virtual currency by doing things. And that doesn't mean that the action that they're doing should be worth any less to an advertiser, as long as it's designed to have that in mind, like download something or play a video or whatever it might be. And so we're looking at alternative engagement models that utilize virtual currency in a way that advertisers recognize the value in. Because quite honestly, the ad networks have basically told us, don't offer ad incentives. Our advertisers will pay nothing for that. And so we had to pull back on it. It's really, I'm confused, but it's a fact. Marketplace is sort of speaking loudly. They don't value it. Our users like it. Advertisers should like it, but they don't.
Yeah, gotcha. So Stephen, you talked about the way that you're selling on Foursquare versus display, and revenue is something new for Foursquare as you're getting into it. As you're building out what sounds like a lot of custom programs, how do you scale that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we are. I mean, so if I kind of look back to the last several years before Foursquare, when I was at Apple and Quattro, the display makes sense for a lot of publishers. It's obviously easier, and there's lots of inventory and scale there. I think with Foursquare, just like Twitter and Facebook, there are lots of companies out there that are building great content management systems. And with Foursquare, just like it is with some of the other social media companies, we're looking at assets that aren't, you don't have to create new assets, you don't have to recreate the wheel, right? You might have to think about the way you position it or the way users engage, but text is text and photos are photos. And so I think what will happen, and Facebook really led the way and paved the way for this, but you're going to have lots of companies. There's a whole, every day I hear another company that's creating some content management platform to manage all the social media assets. So there's a whole industry being built, started with companies like Buddy and Vitrue and just growing, that are there to help manage and create the efficiencies to see this industry scale on that front. So again, I don't think it's recreating the wheel. I had some experience of that at Apple, where we were doing something that really was different. Here, it's doing things that are very similar to what I think marketers and their agencies are already creating.
So, Michael, a lot of publishers who have multiple platforms in this room. You guys came out famously said mobile is the first screen. So how does that actually work on a sales call? Where does mobile really sit?
It's very high up in the conversation, in as much as you've got two different groups traditionally. You've got the television sales force and you've got the digital sales force. And more they go on calls directly together, but as we all know, the agencies aren't necessarily aligned the same way we would want them to be. But the goal is telling the story. The big question at the highest level is mobile replacement dollars or is it additive? In other words, am I seeing that same fan I'm already investing with you in television, or am I seeing someone that's new? And by example, our two flagships are mobile web and something we call Score Center, a native app across iOS, Android, and Windows. And collectively, over 20 million people use both, but only 15%, 20 million people are using both, only 15% are actually using both. In other words, the audiences are unique. So our illustration goals are to marketers to suggest TV and mobile complement each other. On Sundays, by example, we have 10 million people who use our products. We don't carry any games. Fox, NBC, CBS have that privilege with the NFL. Yet 10 million people are accessing content. In that regard, it's very additive. It's very analogous to a cable network in terms of that audience size. And the way we measure audience and the way that we actually illustrate to Madison Avenue is the average minute audience. We can't compete with a Yahoo and a Google in terms of the unique audience necessarily, but the average engaged audience, because of our content, because of sports, it surpasses many cable television networks. And when you begin to illustrate that point, the conversation becomes analogous to a television media buy into mobile. So that's why I'm suggesting it's a mobile-first discussion.
Gotcha. But at the end of the day, do the conversations with the advertisers and with the agencies, it comes about as a natural flow of the conversation, but it's not always the lead.
It's a natural flow, and we're unique in how we approach market, and we feel that we're very sponsorship-driven. Tools are display, rich media, text, video, and audio, but the concept is very much sponsorship.
Yeah.
So it'd be foolish to alienate a medium like mobile given that model.
Yeah. And Eric, how about, I think anyone who's been in the mobile business for a while has seen many different versions of their organization as the whole mobile world changes every couple of months, right? And Medialets has been in many different aspects of leading rich media and a marketplace and ad server. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the transition of a company through the transition of the technology?
Sure. So we see this sort of broadly across the category right now in that people who've spent time in mobile over the course of the last 5 or 10 years have worked particularly hard in the early days of the market to build a market, right? It's just really this year that mobile has been a market at scale for mostly anyone. The prior year, there were a few companies that broke double-digit millions in revenue, and it's just a few media companies that did so. Prior to that, it was all on the messaging side to hit any kind of scale. So the idea that mobile content has been a very robust, thriving ecosystem has been limited to a very small subset of what ultimately mobile is today. But mobile also, it's important to note, isn't homogenous. There isn't one thing that's mobile. Mobile is many things to many different people. It's different types of content. It's different modalities of access. And increasingly so, it's different device form factors in different settings. There are infrastructure providers, there are content providers, there are advertisers that are all collectively working to figure out what the right models are for mobile today. And I don't know that anybody has absolutely nailed exactly what mobile is, right? What do we really get at it? What's the true return on investment for an advertiser or a marketer, and how ultimately do they repeat and scale that across the industry? The corollary to that is, what's truly the content publishing model, right? Is it a utility? Is it long-form consumption? Is it something in the middle? Is it a hybrid of all of those? Or is it, for any given publisher, a number of those things at different points in time and throughout the day? I think we're all collectively trying to figure that out, and it's a great time to be doing so, because the adoption is there, the scale of the audience is there, the devices just continue to get more interesting, and particularly with the introduction of tablets at scale into the market, there are real platforms now for doing not just content consumption at short and long form, but now content creation at short and long form that will ultimately disrupt everything there is in digital media.
Todd, just want to say something too, and I think, I hope in the next 3 to 5 years we won't even have panels like this about monetizing mobile and mobilizing mobile. My bet, Michael, is your now overall web traffic at ESPN is probably hitting the 50-50 mark, if not surpassing it.
Yeah, certainly on weekends.
So I think any publisher who's out there that's creating content and isn't seeing those trends where a vast majority of their traffic is starting to tilt towards that 50-50 mark, probably need to ask themselves the question is, do I have content that's relevant and is it built properly on these devices? But companies like ESPN, Weather, New York Times, you're seeing Pandora, Facebook, Twitter, you're seeing that tipping point. So we're all sitting in this room and we better figure this out quickly because the traffic is going that way and it's going fast. So I think when Eric's talking about that or and Michael as well, I think the the ecosystem, we are figuring it out. It's got to be figured out faster, but I don't think we'll be talking about mobile. It will just be all content and digital very soon.
Well, to that point, I think I sort of boil it down as follows. The numbers are there. It's not about the numbers. Sometimes, for all you media buyers in the audience or people who are responsible for media budgets, sometimes you get the concept first and you kind of wait for the numbers to support the case. The numbers are there. Nobody disputes that, or anybody that does is not looking at what's really happening out there in the world. In 2 years there will be more mobile devices in the world than human beings. In China right now there's nearly 1 billion mobile accounts. So, and it's not just the U.S. thing, obviously. So people are on these screens and they're interacting with these devices and they're doing all kinds of really interesting things. It's not about trying to find the numbers. The numbers are there. So the real question is, how do we think about engagement models? How do we think about ways to take that audience that we know is there and engage them in valuable ways for brands? And it's as simple as that. I mean, honestly, if I were on the end, and we're advertisers too. When I think about budget, I don't have to think about numbers. I think about where do I go to, what's the best way for me to engage an audience for my brand or my product or what I need to do. I don't have to worry about finding people. They're there. They're there.
Yeah, great points. And I think it also gets into sales channels and potential conflicts of sales channels, because we've talked about tablets and there's a lot of tablet discussion throughout the day. But if you ask people who are selling purely from an online perspective, I bet they would raise their hand and say that tablet is an extension of online. If I were to ask you guys, is tablet mobile or is it online? Or is it something different?
I think it's the heart of the question of what's mobile. I mean, it's the verb, right? It's to be mobility and to mobilize. And that's not meant to be something that's so provocative, but the reality is, back to brand awareness and brand delivery, what can you accomplish in mobile you couldn't do through other media? That's our collective focus. And there are opportunities now that were there before, but will become mainstream with Passbook. 70% of all iOS users now adopting the new operating system, that we can take our QSR clients, we can take our clients who traditionally don't have an interaction point beyond the brand awareness and allow them to facilitate couponing directly into a Passbook. Same thing with travel, same thing with our league partners. MLB saw 12% of all tickets in their first week of trialing Passbook being redeemed by Passbook across the country. So this has real tentacles and has real opportunities for brands to do something different in mobilizing their engagement with an audience that continues beyond the banner.
I think that's right, and I think increasingly mobility is becoming less about a device and more about a consumer context, right? We're all mobile. We may happen to be on a phone at one point in time, or happen to be on a tablet, or in front of a television, but I'm still the same person. And while agency teams, to your point, may control separate or distinct budgets, ultimately there's a marketer at the other end of that that's thinking about how to spread their mix across all of these channels. Increasingly, those budgets are going to be finding people in the moments when it's most appropriate to be reaching them with the right kind of message. And it's going to matter less and less exactly what the device is.
How about, let's maybe talk a little bit about data and the wealth of data that you guys see in the mobile environment. Like, I'm just thinking about the amount of check-ins, right? The amount of check-ins we have in this room in Foursquare. So how do you harness that at Foursquare and the others? How do you guys use data?
Yeah, I mean, so we now have seen 3 billion check-ins over the 3.5 years that we've been in existence. We see 5 million check-ins every day. What that's allowed us to do, I mean, I think when you look at the evolution of various kind of social data products that are out there, the things that we're doing today would not have been possible 3 years ago because we just didn't have the information, we didn't have all this data. So under the hood of this experience that you guys see is incredibly complicated data play that we're looking at. And we have some fascinating data visualizations of, let's say, Lower Manhattan and how people are, we can see people lighting up the city at different times of day and night and what they're doing. And so we're making sense of all this data to now be able to surface up recommendations to people. That wouldn't have been possible. We wouldn't have had the social data that we have on users. We wouldn't have had the lat longitude stamps that we have every time you check in. And so I think a big challenge for a lot of folks is, how do you make sense of that data? How do you push it out to users? And then how do you use it from a marketing perspective? And that's really what we're trying to do, so that, again, we're, you know, the goal is to be able to serve up, as always in advertising, marketing, is the right message to the right user at the right time. And now we have the right place. So we know exactly where they're located. We know where they are. It's not just some random geofence. They've told us they've checked in. And now making sure that the message they're getting, that we're serving up in front of them, the content they're getting, is relevant, not just because they're a specific audience or demographic, but they're also at the right time and the right place to see that message. And that's something I think we've all been hoping for, and we're pushing that forward and getting there.
Yeah, I'll say also, you know, particularly in our world of casual games, you know, I think it's a known fact, you know, because Mark Pincus likes to talk about it on every earnings call, hoping that people will believe him finally, that it's all about the data in gameplay, and while it's true that there is an enormous amount of data generated. It really is about sort of sifting through the data for the meaningful pieces that allow us to create a better user experience by that data. You know, I have a saying at the company that, you know, we're never going to die of starvation when it comes to data. We're going to die of indigestion. And it's really all about saying what really matters. What are the things that we ought to take advantage of? And we literally could track every aspect of user behavior on a mobile device. And we you know, for example, we use Omniture, and they're building a whole new set of tools based on our recommendations, just because we needed a whole bunch of stuff that their mobile product didn't really have. And I think it's indicative of what's really facing the entire industry and will start to happen. It'll be an evolutionary thing, but I'm not going to say the soul of mobile is going to be going away, and it's only going to be the quant jocks who are going to own everything. But the fact of the matter is, this is, as a medium, an enormously rich place to mine data. And those that sort of, you know, we like to think that we're going to use it both on the content side and the monetization side to make it happen. We do every day little tweaks to make sure the virtual currency, for example, I monitor the virtual, I feel like Ben Bernanke. You know, I can tell you today, right now, our virtual world has 72 million fun coins in it. Okay, that's low, by the way. We often generate, you know, we go up, we can spike up to around 100 million. And when I found out that the money supply was that low yesterday, we put a 5 for 1 sale out, and it went live at midnight, and we're gonna blow the doors off of revenue today. I mean, I can guarantee you it will happen. But that's the kind of, you know, that's sort of a simple example, but that is what drives this. It's data.
Is data leakage a side effect of data indigestion?
Oh no, I need my Depends. My digital Depends.
Michael, how about the ability or inability to use data across platform?
Yeah, so we're newer to this market. It surprised me, to be candid, coming from Yahoo and how much focus there was there, in as much as probably the sponsorship model prevails at ESPN. That said, we've introduced our approach towards private marketplace this year with first-party data, which is compelling. I mean, there's no other more polarizing and harmonizing industry than sports in terms of either aggregating or disaggregating like audiences. And then secondly, it's very male. And you know, what's interesting about that is traditionally the commerce companies and focus on e-commerce in particular have been handicapped in reaching that audience and seeing any kind of results in web. If you look at every statistic in mobile, look at the guilt group going from 0% of the revenue to 30% now via mobile, but their demographic has gone from 75 female on web to 50-50 on mobile. That plays in our strengths. So returning to kind of whom we are, we can't change the fact that 79 to 85% of our audience every day are men, but in mobile, for whatever reason, there's a propensity to purchase. And we like this, and then our goal is to augment those data facts to our marketers so that they can see return on investment they otherwise hadn't seen from us maybe in web.
Gotcha. How about the CPMs we see in mobile versus display? Maybe, Eric, you want to kick it off with rich media, how it looks within mobile?
There's been a big shift in the course of the past couple of years. Rich media in mobile, circa 3 years ago, on mobile phones would command $15 to $22, $23 CPMs. Tablets at their launch would command anywhere from 40 to, we've seen upwards of $1,000 effective CPMs. Those numbers have certainly changed. We've seen the numbers come down meaningfully as the inventory grows and as the players in the market with significant scale compete for what have been historically small budgets. I think we're going to start to see some upward trending. We're starting to see data points that there are opportunities for upward trending on this as publishers begin to pull back inventory, as budgets grow in the space, and as marketers get a better sense of exactly what it is they would do in mobile or on a tablet device. Tablet in the premium category tends to have held pretty well in terms of its CPMs, particularly as publishers have figured out ways to incorporate video into their tablet ad models and their tablet ad executions.
Great. Michael, anything on CPMs online versus mobile?
Yeah, directionally, we see that where there's scarcity, the prices, of course, go higher. Our Q1, which is calendar Q4, is the most exciting because it's normally the 5 sports leagues that are playing. There's one not playing right now, but there's so much interest in reaching that scale of audience that we have. And then we've been fortunate in markets like video, we've intentionally created scarcity. So much of that is presented and bought in the upfront process intentionally. So you see a larger CPM as a result. So kind of in order, our video properties carry the largest premium, then rich media-based display, then display, and we don't do as much scatter or so-called unsold inventory. And via that, we put it on the exchanges, and of course, those prices are definitely lower than you get through a direct process.
I think that the big problem in, and it's kind of analogous to the late 90s of web, is there's so much supply and the demand is just, it's not there yet. So, it's a race to the bottom right now, and that's got to stop, and that will ultimately weed out some of the shitty companies that are out there. But I think from a publisher perspective too, the dirty little secret for, forever with display advertising is we'd have multiple ads on a page and we'd sell the units as individual single CPM units. But as a publisher, we were getting 20 to 40 or 50 or some $100 page CPMs per page. Now you're going in and you have one ad on a page and the economics don't work. So something's got to change, right? Either publishers are going to have to start selling CPMs much higher in mobile to make up for that lost revenue, or traffic's going to have to be that much significantly more to make up for those dollars. So the economics don't work right now, and it's why you see every couple of days these headlines about how do these companies that are business models are going mobile, how do they succeed, how can they make money? And so I think the economy will work itself out, but we have to look at the mobile experience and prove the value of why that impression, that single impression on a page, is way more valuable than the multiple impressions on a single page on the web. And I think we have to start to hold strong on pricing. Otherwise, it's just going to be a continued race to the bottom for a while, and I don't think that's going to weed out a lot of companies for sure.
I think we have time for one question from the audience in the back.
Well, maybe I can have 1.5. I was wondering if Michael Bayle and his Link Exchange alumni had on, just commiserating at all with you, Todd, on your Jumptap experience. If he's got any.
Commiserating.
Please.
Wow, it's a flashback to nostalgia. No, I mean, ad networks have a play. There's no question Jumptap is among the strongest independently. Getting that scale is what helped lead Link Exchange to be acquired by Microsoft, 15 years ago? So certainly one of the reasons big companies look for opportunities to expand is both talent and what scale you bring. So.
And my other half question is I work for one of those mobile infrastructure providers with responsibility for monetizing the network. And so I'm wondering, with all these value chain participants that Eric had identified, do you see some of the shifts in the business model from the network operators constraining any of the things, the potential that you may see the ad revenue being able to overcome?
I'm going to punt slightly and answer it a little bit of a different way.
Oh, yeah. Good question too.
Sure. So the question is, in a world where mobile operators have historically dominated the distribution, they've dominated the content ecosystem, and frankly, as a result, they've dominated the revenue relating from any of those elements, how have the changes or shifts there either impacted the opportunities in the ecosystem for others, or it sounds like you might have even been asking what's in it for the carriers, maybe a little bit?
Well, with the data plans changing to shared plans, that's actually squeezing consumers. Is there an opportunity for ads to subsidize the activity and potentially allow these new participants to come in from mobile?
There have been any number of attempts at the carrier level. The other half of the question was, as Data gets pricier. What does that do to content? And are there opportunities for better advertising models or more robust advertising models to help that meaningfully? On the mobile operator side, we've seen lots of attempts at ad-supported devices that have had varying degrees of limited success. On the content side, we kind of need advertising in mobile, right? It needs to be there to fund this free ecosystem, particularly in a world where the viability of paid software is just so limited. The coffee cupization of pricing around content and mobile has absolutely destroyed anything but the biggest of scale software businesses in the category. Well, what does that leave? That leaves advertising, it leaves free-to-pay models, it leaves some of the other sort of interesting business models that exist around the space, but certainly those in the mobile content ecosystem are absolutely depending upon advertisers to keep themselves alive.
Now, I'll also say, I actually think that this trend that the mobile carriers are attempting right now to try to raise rates on data plans is actually a short-lived one. I don't think it's going to last very long, because ultimately what people really want is an easy internet connection, a mobile internet connection, and they don't need mobile networks to make phone calls anymore because most people don't use their phones to talk on. And so walking into a hotspot works just as fine as using AT&T's network. In fact, works better. And so I think what you're going to see over time, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think over the course of a few years, you're going to see a pulling back on the carriers on that and rethinking data plans and rethinking what it is they're trying to sell you. They know they can't be in the content business. They really know that, finally. It's taken them a while to kind of get that through there. Is there anybody from the carriers in here? I don't want to say anything bad. But, you know, look, I think that ultimately they're going to have to realize that, you know, not to be pejorative about it, but they really are the pipe. And they've been working really hard to try to distance themselves from that, but that's what they are. And the pricing models will reflect it, and it'll get competitive, and, you know, I think that's a short-lived thing.
Great. Okay, thank you. I think we're out of time. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ron, thank you so much.